If you've been frustrated, if you feel that for every 2 steps forward, you're taking a step back in your healing, if you're feeling stuck, you've got to hear this man. I'm gonna let you listen to this, and I'll be back at the end with a message. You don't want to miss this.
I've had quite a few questions by email, quite detailed questions. People, just in the midst of this process that we call healing, wanting to know how long it's going to last and what happened as I progressed through that process, which is a life's journey, really. But there are definite sort of periods, definite thresholds. And so I thought I'd make a video answering all those questions, and I would try and sort of share the arc of the last 10 years, because that's how long it's taken to sort of reach a point, a really meaningful threshold, a kind of tipping point. First of all, I want to begin here that I don't think it's helpful to think of this as healing. And I've always said healing. I've used that word, but I've also fairly often said I don't really know what that means. Healing implies the repair of a wound. That isn't what happens. Nothing gets repaired. Nothing gets fixed. Nothing is changed, apart from how you show up and how you live with what happened. So you become more intimately acquainted with the wound. You feel it more deeply, you see it more clearly, and you learn to be with it. Because our inability to be with the pain is what reduces our bandwidth of presence in the world. So the more you feel, the more present you are. And so I think if we characterize this journey, this process, as healing, you think you've got to fix something. And if you can't, you just go further and further into pain, and then you think, shit, this isn't right. I keep hitting this wall of resistance inside me. I can't change, I can't heal, I can't fix myself. And then you think that you're doing something wrong, that you are wrong. You hate yourself. You think there's all these things you need to change. And the person you became as a consequence of trauma is then seen as this kind of awful, terrified, kind of wraith of a person that's sort of barely here, barely coping, barely holding it together. You just think all of that is wrong. All of it is an intelligent strategy to protect you, to hold yourself together in fear, in hostility. You become who you need to become, and all of that is necessary. And if you can see it as something you had to do to be a guardian, a protector of your own innocence and vulnerability, I think it's better to frame it that way, because that's the truth. And then when you see yourself like that, it's much easier to find some tenderness and some kindness for the limitations that we live with. Because the person we become, if you're going through this process, then you want more. You need more. You want to live. And within you, through you, there is a force, a presence, an irresistible force that is you. It's life, it's love, it's truth, it's being, it's presence, it's goodness, it's rightness, it's morality, it's cleanliness, it's non-judgment, it's non-criticism, it's no apology. And that, and all those qualities, that force, life wants to live through you, but it keeps meeting this seemingly immovable object in its path. And it's the confines of the person we became, the restrictions of the person we became to protect ourselves, to withdraw from the world, just to protect our own innocence and vulnerability. And so that force, that presence wants to live through us, but it can't fully. And there's a devastating realization that, obviously this is just my own take on what I've been through over the last 10 years, but there was a devastating realization for me when I kept hitting this resistance, and I didn't know what it was. I thought, why can't I change? Why can't I heal? Why can't I fix myself? Why can't I just do something different, be different? And the devastating realization was, that thing in the way is me. It's who I am. And I can't be somebody else. So how am I ever going to be free of pain? How am I ever going to be at peace? How am I ever going to be right, not be wrong, be acceptable, be normal? And then you realise that, and then you think, who I became as a consequence of the trauma. The essence of the story that is me is that trauma, is that pain. So how can I be free of it? So in a way you can't. You can't change 1 second. But in a way, you are actually who you think you are. Because we become self-centered, because we retreat into the refuge of self and the microcosm of our own kind of sense of wrongness and corruption that comes from the trauma, self-disgust, the shame, the fragments of what we reject in ourselves, and then exaggerate the stuff we think is acceptable, all of that cannot exist in harmony because you're inwardly rejecting aspects of yourself. So we're just focusing on some of it and not other bits of it, who we are. And so that microcosm of fragmentation becomes the macrocosm of the world that you inhabit. We're always trying to think our way to wholeness. We're always trying to complete ourselves, to make sense of it all, to explain it, incessantly explaining it. That's what I did with this channel. And it doesn't really work. So when you include everything, see it all clearly. That's what this process is. It's a clear seeing of everything you didn't want to see, everything you didn't want to feel. And when you go through that, when you willingly expose yourself, go into the room, and feel more deeply the agony, the loss, the fear, the shame, the corruption, the disgust, the heartbreak. You begin to feel all that, learn how to be with it. The absence that is swathed in shadow inside you comes into the light, and the bandwidth of your presence and your ability to feel increases. You're no longer withholding yourself from occupying the space you already stand in. You begin to feel your skin and become real. So nothing is healed, nothing is fixed. And as you sort of go through this process, you begin to see that there is another you. That all of these awful experiences and the fragments of the self of self-centeredness can be included within kindness and gentleness and compassion, and focus shifts from trying to fix the unfixable to resolve the unresolvable. Focus shifts from that into the present. And so who we become as a consequence of the trauma is kind of like a guardian for our own innocence and vulnerability. But to be here requires vulnerability. You have to be found. You have to be available. So that guardian that is the coping identity that we then hate because of its limitations and trying to fix is also the kind of guardian at the threshold of your own freedom. The resistance you meet is your unwillingness to be vulnerable. So for me anyway, when I went through this, I cried. I went through a period of just crying in my sleep, and I'd wake up crying, because we can't afford to feel the loss. It's just the loss of so much. So you'll cry tears of realization of what you lost. What was taken from you was your ability to be here, to experience life, your ability to experience intimacy, your ability to be free of conflict. Always placing conditions on what you're prepared to accept in yourself, what you're prepared to accept in the world. I'll show up when I've achieved this, when I've become this. It just never works. You judge yourself, you criticize, and you do it to everybody else, and you do it to this moment. So when you begin to see the tragedy of what you've lost and what you refuse, you'll cry the tears of sorrow that you couldn't afford to cry before. But then there are other tears that come from a different place. Those tears are the ones that we are most reluctant to feel. And you'll cry those tears when you're crushed. You won't give them up before that, I don't think, because they are the essential acceptance that it wasn't your fault. I mean the real transformational knowing that it wasn't your fault. And we don't want to really accept that, I think, in a way. We know it with our minds. And because it wasn't our fault, we use that injustice as fuel for our kind of our rage, sometimes spite, that fierceness that keeps that fire burning inside us that says, F this. I'm here. I'm going to survive. So we can't afford to really feel. The reason those tears are reluctant and they come under great weight and they're so transformative is that if you really, really see that it wasn't your fault, you also see how vulnerable you were and how powerless you were. And I think that we don't want to see that because that's how we still are. And you can't afford to let go of the illusion that you are somehow shielding yourself from any hurt now. Maybe you are a little bit, but at what cost? At what cost? Presence, intimacy. Now. Being here right now. That's what it costs you. That's what it cost me. And I see that now. I didn't want to cry those tears. And for me, I grieved for a couple of years where I would have these profound transformative realizations that were extremely validating, because you're kind of giving expression to feelings that you denied as a child because you said, I can't afford to feel this. It's my fault, so I won't feel them. And you deny yourself, you invalidate yourself when you do that. So when you cry them now as an adult, validates the past. It resets the past and you see it all more clearly. But, those tears of true catharsis, of the acknowledgement of your own powerlessness and vulnerability, is also the acceptance of how vulnerable you are right now. And how the illusion of control and protection and strength, it's brittle. It's isolation, it's separation, it's a lack of presence. So those tears, I mean, I like I just said, I cried a lot when I was grieving, but there were episodes of crushing intensity where I literally just cried a few salty tears. They were burning, and I can't even express how difficult it was to get those tears to come. And I think we still resist. I had a session. I work with a lady now. I have sessions with a lady now, and so I let her into a memory last week actually. And we got somewhere actually. Really got somewhere meaningful this week. And I let her into a memory. And she said, just include me. You can keep me as far away as you want. Just include me somewhere. And I included her, but I had her with me, and she held my hand. And I opened my eyes and she was crying. She could feel it. She can feel with me. And that's what we need. Someone to feel with us. But we need to include other people. We need to find relationships where we can trust and nurture truth. Because what happens is, in the isolation of abuse and neglect, we don't have anybody. We don't have anybody. There's nowhere to complete. So we look for completion in ourselves, and it doesn't work. We need isolating, broken lives. You know, I had addiction, alcohol problems, drug abuse. First time I got drunk was when I was 8 with my mum. And I just had a life of addiction and drug abuse and eating disorders. Crazy, crazy, crazy brokenness. Because I didn't want to feel that pain. So you are the guardian at the threshold of your own vulnerability. So all that shit that you hate about yourself, don't hate it. Don't hate it. It's what you needed to be. It's who you needed to be, but that time is over now. You want more. Life wants more from you. It's not about what we want. What are you supposed to be doing? What does life want from you? So you need to let go. This is the thing. This is why it takes so long. So we have to let go. Let go of what we want, what we think we want. Let go of who we think we are. That's why it's a long process, because you will meet your refusal over and over and over again. You'll meet your reluctance to let go of the idea of who you think you are, because it does feel like death, and it is a death. It's the death of the illusory self, the coping self, and it's the emergence of a self that is nothing and everything. Doesn't need to explain anything, doesn't need to claim anything, doesn't feel pride, doesn't feel fear. Feels the joy and pain of life. Other-centered presence. So all those kind of things that I've talked about over the years on this channel, like the need to be seen, that foundational need to be seen, to even know that you're real. You know, we live in our heads as a refuge as traumatized kids. We don't even know we're real. We don't even know we're here. We're not here. And so there is a stepping stone. The need to be seen. And we contrive all these ways to be seen. But we're not really. We know that we're performing a deception. And that makes us feel desolate. So there's a need to be seen, the need to be known. And further to that, the need to know that there is something of value in your existence, how you show up. But all of that really is still self-centered. And when you get through that, you realize that the need is shared experience, it's intimacy. And the need for intimacy is met by giving yourself away. It's nothing you possess, it's nothing you gain or achieve. It happens in relationship. So the reason that this is such a difficult journey as well is because the person that we think we are at the beginning, the coping identity that wants to achieve healing, wants to fix itself, wants to possess peace, that thinks it's going to aggressively go at that. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to do this. I'm going to heal. I'll use all these different modalities, and it becomes the focus of your life, and it's in the wrong place. Because the process is one of disappearance. It's the disappearance of that, the self that wants to possess and achieve. You don't survive. The you that sets off on this journey is not capable of experiencing peace. Is not capable of experiencing intimacy. So there's a gradual surrender, and then you reach a tipping point, and I'm at that tipping point now, where the invitation into the nothingness of your own presence far outweighs the attachment to the story, far outweighs to the attachment to pride, fear, ego, and then the focus shifts. It's not on the past, it's on now. It's on now. And, you know, the difficult part of that, the next bit of the journey is just the clear seeing of your own ego. You're no longer crippling yourself with self-hate because of how self-centered you are and how broken you feel. Now you can see the why of it all. When ego gets that wince of humiliation, it's a gift. It's a gift. And you will feel it more deeply, but with more forgiveness than ever before. And you just want to let go. You just want to let go. So you'll welcome those little winces of pain when you witness your own pride. There's nothing to achieve. There's nothing to possess. There's nothing to fear. The fear is what we carry. So this whole thing is death and birth. It's the ending of childhood and the beginning of maturity. It's the beginning of accepting what and who you are, accepting that there is a mystery there, a nothingness and an emptiness. You are a part of something vast that you can only barely perceive, but you know it's there. It is you. You are it. But we refuse it. We refuse it over and over and over again. Yes, so it's not healing. No wound is repaired. You see it more clearly. You know that wound inside you far more intimately than ever before. And the process really does destroy who you thought you were, who you needed to become. And when you begin to approach this tipping point, cross this threshold, however you want to see it, you can see it all very, very clearly. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to hate. There's nothing to fix or heal. Yeah, so it took about 10 years for me. From the point where I began to realise that my identity was a coping mechanism, it was a mask, and inside me was a terrified little boy just screaming in anguish, and he had been my whole life. So from that initial realisation to now, it's been 10 years. So don't rush, because you'll just make it worse. And those peaks of realisation where you think you've arrived and everything's sorted and you understand everything, and then you crash down into a trough, those peaks and troughs become shallower and shallower and shallower and shallower. And then it's just this gradual acceptance of transformation and disappearance. So I think that's it. Be kind to yourselves, above all. Be gentle. I'll see you soon.
Now, I don't have much to add to what Sam said, but he talked about a 10-year process. And while he says that wounds don't heal, I only differ with him on this point. Please take the time to hit the subscribe button and like the video. Any wound will heal. How well it heals, whether it heals just on the surface and festers underneath, or whether it heals to the bone, it will heal on some level. What I agree with is that the scars don't disappear. So no matter how well a wound heals, if it's bad enough that you were wounded, that wound will never disappear. You will see the stitches, you will see the scar. So you'll never get rid of the scars, but if you come through the healing process, then they become badges of honor as you make it count. I think what Sam called it was showing up in the world and owning the space you occupy, and the importance of, the way I put it, the world needs you and what only you can give. So I don't agree that you never heal. Depends on how you're defining healing. The scars never disappear, but they will heal. I want to bring a couple of points to light here in the interest of encouragement. The purpose of your treatment is to initially provide you coping strategies so that you can recognize when you're getting drawn into that trauma and know how to cope in the moment and have better outcomes through your coping strategies. It's also meant to help you to understand and process the emotions and the memories that are tied to the traumatic experiences. what trauma trained therapists will do is they will help you to reframe what you've been through. So, in other words, you'll gain a much healthier viewpoint. I think Sam hit on this. You'll gain a healthier perspective of what you went through, and you'll be able to attach meaning to those events that are beneficial in accepting that they happened and giving you the proper perspective. Basically, it's going to help you to take off the trauma glasses that are all clouded up and muddy. You take the glasses off, but you don't forget the trauma. You don't forget what you went through. The wound is still there, but it no longer owns you, if that makes any sense. And then it helps you to emerge. In other words, you're going to integrate the past into the present, okay? So you're not always getting snatched back to the past and doing stuff in the present that perpetuates your messed up situation. You are not forgetting that past, hence the wound is always evident, okay? But you're integrating what you went through into your here and now as you learn who you truly are. Remember, Sam touched on that he was caught up in his, I think what he called it, the coping self, the survival self, that he kept hammering at that survival self and blaming himself because he wondered, why can't I change this? Because he falsely believed that that was who he was. The major significance here is that Sam is detransitioning. He had transitioned to a woman for years. When he talks about toward the end of that, about what he believed he was and those changes that he made based on the screaming little boy, that was how major that change was. And his 10-year healing journey has occurred as he began to recognize why he had made those changes, and in his life he chose to detransition. But as he made that, he also recognized that he had to deal with that screaming little boy. So if you ever hear me say, go back and get that little boy, go back and get that little girl, as he was saying, they're jumping up and down in your face, hollering and screaming, and you're over here in your coping survival self, ignoring that child, just like the abusers ignored you, right? And you're your coping survival self, hollering and screaming. You want to be seen, but you can't be seen until you recognize that hollering and screaming little boy or little girl that you keep ignoring just like everybody else did. This is all part of that integration of the past. And I'm making this point because we have to understand that nobody's trying to make you forget that stuff. We can't make you forget that, right? We can't make you forget that. But all of that can be empowering against the background of who you truly are. Remember, Sam came to a realization, wait a minute now, I'm in my own way. I keep getting in the way. He was frustrated because he felt like he wasn't making any progress, but then he realized, shoot, this is me in my way, but is it me? No, it's the coping me who doesn't want to face what I went through. And he rightfully said, you have got to turn around. You got to face that stuff. And it ain't easy. It hurts. That's what I want you guys to understand. This process is not easy. And the person you were, as he said, when you came into this, will not survive the healing process. And you will become that true person who you truly are. And that's the power of your existence. It's that realization coming into who you truly are underneath the coping survival self that holds your greatest power. That's why I always say your greatest power is realized in the truth of who you are. And that's what Sam was explaining, that his 10-year process has brought him to some turning points. So it's just like any other mindset change. You will reach certain turning points and you'll have certain things along the way that you will always celebrate. But understand that as you peel off layers of trauma, then there will be another layer under there that you will now be better prepared to address. So I call it CURE, coping, understanding, reframing, and emerging. Now, this is what healing is not. Hear this. Healing is not meant to make you forget what happened. So if your idea of what healing is includes forgetting that's not going to happen. Healing is not a linear process. So it's not like, and you're just going to keep going along this line. Just like Sam said, it's going to be up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. But as he said, that up and down, those humps become shallower and shallower as you go along. So don't expect that it's just going to be a linear process. It'll be ups and downs and spin arounds. And if you can accept that that's how it's going to be, you won't be so frustrated with it. And you won't be telling yourself that you're not making progress. Healing is not a competition. The last thing you should do in your healing journey is to be looking at Mary Sue and Jack over here and comparing yourself to theirs. Nobody's healing journey is going to be the same. And if anybody try to tell you you should have yours look like theirs, then just step out of the frame. Just leave the premises, because that's not how it's going to be. They didn't have your same experiences. And even if they had, those experiences would affect them differently than it does you. So you got to keep your eyes on the prize, which is freedom from the past, and understand you cannot compare yourself to anybody else. Healing is also not a single event. Okay. It's not like that you're like if you're playing a Monopoly game, tick, 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 and you land on Park Place, right? It's not about that. It's a destination, for instance. It's not like you can set your GPS and you're going to get somewhere and eventually you have arrived, right? No, that's not what healing is, okay? It's not a single event. It's like Sam said, you're going to experience these ups and these downs and these setbacks. You know, it's a process. It's not a single event. You're going to have progress and setbacks, and it's a process of experiencing and moving through your negative emotions. Now, this is not going to be, oh, I finally arrived. No. You're going to just be frustrated and wanting to give up if that's what you're looking for. It's going to be a journey and a process, and you should celebrate every win along the way. Finally, and you've heard me say this ad nauseum, healing is not something you can do alone. If you are trying to do this all on your own and just get better, it's not going to happen. So don't frustrate yourself with that. You're going to need a safe place. Sam talked about a safe place. Now, I did edit out, there was one point where he began to talk about this therapy experience he had where she cried with him. And at the beginning, when he started to talk about it, he turned away from the camera for about a minute. And he was trying to pull himself together. So I did cut out that minute, but I put a link so you can go and watch it yourself. But that experience was so deep for him and so profound. And I'm pointing out the fact that she must have been a trauma trained. There's a difference. Click the playlist at the end of this video, and you'll see some of the things I tell you about how important it is for people with trauma to deal with trauma-trained therapists, not trauma-informed, trauma-trained. Because the way I was trained in school, it's completely different from how you have to address trauma in your clients. Completely different. And he cried because she held his hand and he let her in. And when he realized that she was experiencing it with him, that she was touched and didn't feel like she couldn't show him that she had cried, that touched him so deeply. That's an experience that exemplifies the importance of finding a safe place. And that's going to have to involve other people, including a trauma-trained therapist. Okay? Don't feel like you have to take the first therapist. I'm not going to go into what you need to look for here, but there are videos that I'll put at the end of this so that you can watch it and see what you need to know about finding a trauma-trained individual to provide your treatment. Well, that's it today. Thank you so much for dropping by. I certainly hope that you will subscribe and share this with someone you think it's going to help. And be sure to go give Sam some love. You can click below in the description and find out how to reach him. Go check out his channel. This man is so real. So real. And I couldn't have experienced a more profound description of the healing process. I subscribe. I want you to as well. Always remember, your greatest power is realizing the truth of who you are. Know that truth. If you like this type of content, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when I upload. Thanks.